India Today's Rahul Kanwal spoke with Eylon Levy, the spokesperson for the Israeli Prime Minister office. Listen in to what he had to say.
I want to go across live and exclusive at this time to Tel Aviv, where we are joined by Eylon Levy, spokesperson in the office of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel. Mr. Levy, thank you very much for joining us on India Today. I want to start by getting you to give our viewers a sense of how you see this war 10 days on from Israel's perspective. How do you think this offensive is shaping up so far?
Israel is a country that is still trying to identify the human remains left behind by the October 7th massacre, a brutal ISIS-style terror attack with a death toll of 1,300 people and rising, nearly 4,000 people injured, 199 Israelis in captivity, hostages inside the Gaza Strip. Many of the remains burned beyond recognition by the Hamas death squads that entered Israel last Saturday and beheaded, butchered, burned, shot everyone they saw. Now, Israel has been very clear about what its goals are for the next stage of the operation. This isn't another round of fighting in which Israel is going to degrade Hamas or deter the Hamas terror organization. This is a war that Israel was forced into, a war we didn't want, a war we didn't expect, but a war that we're going to win, and a war that we are going to win by destroying Hamas, so that this terrorist organization, after its ISIS-like atrocities that we saw just 10 days ago, can never, ever cause any harm to Israeli civilians and citizens ever again.
There are many who would say that Hamas is very difficult to destroy. You can destroy the top leadership of the Hamas, but because the Hamas is an ideology, till the time there is some form of settlement, some form of peace solution, the Hamas, or whatever it is that it is at that time known by, the idea of the Hamas will keep cropping up. So how do you respond to those who think that you're going in, that an urban war in the Gaza Strip could be very expensive for Israel as well, apart from the impact on the people of the Gaza Strip, and this is a war that Israel will find very difficult to win in the way that you're defining victory?
I think we're having some technical difficulties because your voice is a little bit crackly, so perhaps your technical team can try to fix that. But I think if I understood the question, look, the situation in the Gaza Strip is this. Israel intends to go after the totality of Hamas's military and governing machine inside the Gaza Strip so that it can never again harm Israelis. Now, the problem is that Hamas has embedded its military facilities, its terrorist sites, its command centers, its operation centers, its rocket launchers inside civilian areas, underneath people's homes, underneath schools, underneath hospitals, in order to use those people as human shields. Now, those are legitimate military targets. They were used to perpetrate the atrocity that we saw 10 days ago, and Israel is going to destroy them. Now, in order to target Hamas's terrorist infrastructure, because we don't want to see any people hurt, as a democratic country, we don't want to see any civilian casualties, Israel is asking civilians to temporarily evacuate the areas that are going to see very heavy fighting for their own safety until the fighting is over. That's what we expect the international community to do and support, and that is in fact their obligation under international humanitarian law to facilitate the evacuation of civilians to places of greater safety away from the areas of combat. Unfortunately, what we're seeing on the ground is Hamas, first of all, stopping civilians from fleeing. There have been roadblocks erected by Hamas terrorists on the main roads in the Gaza Strip so that civilians trying to flee the combat areas can't get out. We also have reports of Hamas stealing people's car keys so they can't escape. And news came out just in the last few hours that UNRWA, the UN Palestinian Refugee Agency inside the Gaza Strip, said that Hamas people had in fact stolen fuel and medicine from inside its own warehouses for its military purposes. A tweet, by the way, that UNRWA, the UN agency, deleted afterwards, apparently under pressure, of course, raising extreme questions here about its sincerity and its credibility, and just more evidence showing about how Hamas abuses civilians inside the Gaza Strip, often with the complicity of international organizations.
Now, American President Joe Biden comes to Tel Aviv likely Wednesday. We also know that today your boss, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, spoke to Vladimir Putin, the Russian president, for the first time. Could you give us a sense of your expectation from the American president's visit and how that call with the Russian president went?
Israel expects the full support of the international community for this war, a war, again, we didn't want, a war we were forced into, but this war to destroy Hamas. And we're heartened that so many international leaders have understood what a shocking atrocity this was on the 7th of October. 1,300 people murdered. We're a country of 10 million people. There isn't a single family in Israel who doesn't know someone who was abducted or murdered or is still missing. And so many world leaders, including from India, and we're very grateful for India's support, have said that Israel has not only a right, but a duty to defend itself. President Biden has been very clear about that. He's said that if such an attack happened to the United States, he would expect its own response to be swift, overwhelming, and decisive. And that is exactly what Israel is going to do. We're going to act just like the international community. Hamas is ISIS. Hamas is worse than ISIS. And we're going to destroy Hamas just like the enlightened world destroyed ISIS, by using the exact same techniques, by going after Hamas with the exact same force that the international community used against the brutal terrorists of ISIS. And we expect the international community to stand by our side as we enter what is going to be a very difficult stage now, but a necessary stage, because we as the State of Israel have no other option in order to repel what was, I'll remind you, a crime against humanity. Members of 42 nations were either murdered, abducted, or injured in this attack. It was a crime against humanity, a crime against the whole humankind. And Israel is standing now on the front lines of humanity against the same barbaristic terrorism that we saw from groups like ISIS. And that's the evil that we're determined to uproot, and we expect the world to support us in that end.
Is Israel concerned about this conflict expanding and becoming a three-way fight against Israel? Are you anticipating that the Hezbollah operating in southern Lebanon is likely to get involved on the side of the Hamas, especially as you go into Gaza? How are you reading the developments in Syria? Is Prime Minister Netanyahu concerned about this becoming a three-frontal attack?
It's very important, first of all, that you're covering this from a global and regional perspective. This is a conflict not only against the brutal terrorists of Hamas in the Gaza Strip. Israel has also come under attack from Hezbollah, Hamas's twin sister, also sponsored by the Iranian regime up in the north. And Israel has been very clear. We do not want war with Hezbollah, just as we did not want war with Hamas. But if Hezbollah, the Iranian proxy terror organization, drags us into a full-scale war, we will win that war. Israel doesn't want to have to fight on two fronts, but if we're forced to do that, we will fight on both fronts, and we will win. And in that context, we're very heartened that the international community is also standing by Israel, the United States sending 2 aircraft carrier to the eastern Mediterranean in order to send a very clear message to Hezbollah and to Iran. As President Biden said in his very moving words of support for Israel just last week, for anyone thinking of messing or testing with the state of Israel, our message is one word: don't.
Iran's foreign ministry has put out a statement saying that if the 200 hostages who are being held in the Gaza Strip are released, then the airstrikes on the Gaza Strip should stop, asking the Israel Defense Forces, stop your airstrikes, and that Hamas, which has 200 hostages, is willing to release those hostages if the airstrikes and the attack on the Gaza Strip stops.
The situation with the hostages inside the Gaza Strip, we are talking about 199 men, women, children who were abducted by Hamas and Islamic Jihad, cruelly stripped away from their beds, tortured, abducted, taken into the Gaza Strip. We're talking about babies, some just a few months old. We're talking about elderly people, grandparents without their medication. We don't know whether they're being fed. We don't know whether, well, we assume they're not being given basic humanitarian mercy, because we saw the brutality with which the ISIS-style Hamas regime cuffed children, burned them alive inside Israel. And Israel's message is very clear. We demand the immediate and unconditional return of our hostages. No ifs, no buts. There is no excuse for invading a village with thermobaric weapons, stripping babies away from their bed, and abducting them into some godforsaken tunnel inside the Gaza Strip. Their place is back here, in the loving embrace of their families, and we demand their immediate and unconditional return. And we're very grateful for every voice we have in the international community as well, sending the message, reminding the world that there are nearly 200 Israelis inside in captivity in the Gaza Strip, that this is unacceptable, that it's a war crime, that it's a crime against humanity. We appreciate that support, and we want them back.
Eylon Levy, for joining us from Tel Aviv, thank you very much. That's the spokesperson of Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu speaking to India today.